Save the Semantics, episode 58. It is January 26, 2019. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I reflect on my childhood and talk about things that helped to develop me into the person that I am today. It's that kind of podcast now. At least based on what I've been talking about for the last couple episodes. It's just kind of been like reminiscing about shit, I guess. Although, in a way, if you think about it, most podcasts are like that, telling stories or talking about things that, just going down memory lane, I guess, reflecting on certain things, that sort of thing, Yeah, almost through this month, which is kind of crazy. It's always like that, it's just like, I feel like it's always just going to be a thing that I'm just going to continue to address is how fast things are going, how fast time is traveling in a sense, how much I take it for granted, how much every second is worth, that kind of thing, every minute is worth in a way. I don't know. It's just me rambling about shit. I don't think anything right now. I just kind of wanted to get out here and talk about stuff, whatever that may be, I don't have a whole lot of things up here at the moment that is of immediate nature, I guess, or it needs to be immediately addressed. I just kind of wanted to just get things, just ramble on about things that currently interest me, whatever that may be, Not a whole lot, I guess. Haven't really done too much this week. Although I have been productive in terms of academic work. Just been studying and stuff, getting ready for the upcoming exams the following week. That sort of thing, nothing really too exciting. Not too much to report there, I guess, I was talking with a friend about how, and this is probably something that I've already addressed because this podcast is just a cycle of just me repeating the same shit over and over again. But just sort of the differences between, sort of the responsibilities that I have now, which is just academic work, and some, personal life responsibilities. And then moving on from that to, real life stuff, which is work and taxes, like I've mentioned frequently, I'm currently learning about taxes in class right now, and I think I consider that to be pretty vital information. I think I've learned some, genuinely important stuff from that class, just knowing, like, the sort of how much you have to pay in taxes, federal taxes every year, that sort of thing, realize that that's something that you need to take into account, right? You have to understand the thresholds, if your income goes above a certain threshold, you're going to be in another tax bracket. You have to take into account standard deductions and all that other shit. And, as the high obviously, income tax is a progressive tax. And I'm just saying shit that nobody gives a fuck about. But you really should. Out of all the things that I've talked about, this is probably the most important thing. And I'm not trying to, like, make myself into, like, some, some preliminary or even, like, primary source of information. But no, this is actually, like, important. I realize this. But it's good to know, like, how much you have to pay for taxes, right? Because I think a lot of people aren't aware of, like, what certain things can be included in tax, right? Maybe you might be doing extra work for nothing. You might not even get, like, a deduction for anything, right? And it's complicated. There's a lot of, like, minute details that bypass people because they don't really understand tax law, even if it isn't the most, like, complex of things. It's in the details. It's a lot of things that you have to take into account. So I'm glad I'm learning about these kinds of things, And I don't know, if for whoever, wherever you are listening, like, it's good to know, like, and however old you are, I guess it's good to know how much you have to contribute to the government budget in a sense, right? I don't really know what the tax breakdown is for every country, but I'm sure it's like, I don't know how readily available it is, but I'm sure you can just look up like 2019 or 2018 actually, federal tax information, state tax information too. You gotta take that into account. So just something that you have to learn, I guess. Something that I'm continuing to learn as I go through school. So despite the the stereotype, the stigma that tax is boring, and it is boring. It's just a lot of semantics, if you will, but it is genuinely important information that people should be aware of. And currently I have ripped jeans, and I think my underwear is showing, which is a little embarrassing. I think I need to get new jeans pretty soon. I've had these jeans for a long time, mainly because my waistline hasn't expanded at all in the last like 4 years, and neither has like my body frame at all. I'm pretty sure I can still fit the same shit I've been wearing since like 6th grade, not 6th grade, like 9th grade, just because like I have a relatively thin body frame, and I haven't really expanded on that at all, which is like, a good and bad thing. Doesn't necessarily expand my own fashion sense, even though I've been kind of trying to do that, which I've talked about as well. Where was I going to go with this? Yeah, so taxes. Taxes are important, It's shitty. It's it's annoying to deal with, but it's just something that you have to really take into account, right? What is it? Death taxes and then some other shit. I know there's there's probably a joke for that. I know when it's like if it relates to like basketball, it's like death taxes and the Spurs making the playoffs, is that kind of thing. Those three things are like inevitable, If you're an NBA fan, you'll get that joke. But yeah, that's something that you just kind of have to go through with. There was something I started off the podcast by talking about how this has become just more me just reminiscing about shit. I'm trying to think of where I was going with that. But I think that's just kind of been the entire podcast, to be honest. But I mean, what else do I have to go off of? I haven't really necessarily even experienced life to an extent where I'm like, oh shit, I can talk about all these things, right? I don't really travel because I'm too busy with other stuff. This is sort of how I'm able to get certain things off my chest in a way, Like, how else are you going to speak about things? You speak of things from experience. Like, I don't necessarily, like, you can talk about other things that you've witnessed, like, maybe it's like a video or something, and then you can talk about that. But that's still something that maybe you haven't directly experienced it, but you've sort of like vicariously viewed it through someone else's perspective, through a camera, or like a point of view perspective, right? So that's in a sense is sort of speaking from experience of like watching a video or viewing a series, listening to music, that kind of thing, right? It's not really that necessarily that deep of a concept, I feel, but I think that's just how most narrators or orators sort of begin storytelling. It's just talking from experience, right? And I think that this is just sort of one venue that I'm okay being, not necessarily being transparent on, but being more open about what I think, I guess, and who I am in a sense. Just something that I enjoy doing for the most part. Anyways, now that I remember what I wanted to talk about, speaking of like videos and stuff like that, there's one thing that has kind of been, I guess, absent recently. I don't know about absent, but it's just something that I haven't come across. Maybe it's because like I'm speaking of like YouTube and stuff like that, so maybe like just based on like what I watch, the recommended videos shown don't really reflect what's popular, I guess, in a sense. You know, it's just mostly like catering towards my own tastes. But something that I haven't really heard of necessarily or seen, both on YouTube and just in like media in general, is just like parodies and stuff like that. You know, well, I guess like SNL does like parodies and stuff like that, but I've never found those to be like that funny. You know, and of course I know it's kind of, it's a bit of like beating a dead horse to like bag on SNL for getting those skits and, you know, those bits to be too long. And it is, because it's just like sometimes the joke goes for way too long, and it just doesn't really and it doesn't really just, it doesn't have the initial impact that it may have wanted to, you know. But I remember back in like middle school, I was much more engrossed with the idea of like a parody, you know. And so one of the things that sort of brings me back was like, in middle school, I think, no, yeah, it was during middle school when like Eminem had his sort of like, he had the Revival album come out, which is funny because he sort of had like a little bit of like a revival in terms of like his career in a way. I don't necessarily know how, I don't remember, but I remember Not Afraid being like huge back in like 7th or 6th grade, you know. And this one YouTube channel called The Key of Awesome, something like that, they made a couple of parodies of that song, and then the one song that he did with Rihanna back then. And I remember thinking that was like the funniest shit ever. But I think that just parodies in a sense don't necessarily like, I think they just don't age very well because it's very like contemporary, you know. So the joke is like just within that span of time, right? Unless the song itself is timeless, then the parody can hold water too, you know. Like, I guess like a good example of someone who does this is Weird Al, right? Like I'm not gonna be like I'm not gonna be publicly jamming out to Weird Al in a sense, but you know, I have an album of his in my backlog of my, you know, of my music app, where he's done like parodies of older songs from like the 2000s and early 90s and stuff like that. And I think some of those still kind of hold up well today because they aren't necessarily like, the songs themselves are relatively well known. So if like, you know, 10 years down the line, we'll still remember the original song, like Piano Man, for example. He did a parody of that song. I forgot what I think the song was like, it related to Spider-Man, I guess, you know. And I think, you know, Spider-Man is also like a timeless subject. So like, for example, that song holds well for the most part, right? It's not a complicated song. He's just singing about the plot of Spider-Man and how he became a superhero, which is dumb, you know. It's corny, but it's funny. Another example is like, you know, the Michael Jackson parodies that he's done, and it's like, it's very elementary humor, you know. It's like, I'm fat, eat it, that kind of shit. It's so stupid, but it's just, you know, I look on it like for the most part fondly, right? I don't really have like a bad view of that kind of thing. But there's a lot of other parodies that don't really hold up well. Like, I think that might be the case. It's just like, you know, it's not like these YouTube channels back in the day that made parodies. Like, I just don't think they don't really, maybe, I don't know. They don't probably think that big of it, but I just think that like parodies aren't really that funny, you know, for the most part. Like, I think a lot of parodies just fall short of what they wanted to attempt, because like the whatever, like, you know, you can parody a song, but like you can't really, like, if that original song itself, you know, is going to be dated from a year from now, then like the joke is just not going to land. You know, it was probably, the novelty of it kind of dies down immediately after the original song loses its like popularity and novelty, I think, you know. And like I've said before, like connecting it back to how the internet works nowadays, like considering how fast things update. You know, you talk about memes and just like cultural, how quickly things shift from one focus to another, that kind of thing. You know, just like I just don't think parodies really hold water. They're essentially like a meme, like a very short-lived meme where it's just like it's a funny joke at one point and then it doesn't really hold well later on in its life, I guess. And maybe it's just like another thing, like going back to what I said. I think, you know, as you grow older, like you find different things funny or not as funny as you did before. Like I mentioned, like the YouTube channel that parodied those Eminem songs. It's just not, you know, it's not funny anymore. And then like the also, I think like the length of the parodies too. If they go on for too long, then it's just like an SNL skit. It just doesn't work anymore, right? And I think SNL is the only like contemporary thing that's like parodying like songs and stuff like that. And I'm not really talking about like I think movie parodies have kind of died as well. I think there was that whole. I remember like. I don't have like a very clear memory of it, but I remember there was like a period in like the late 2000s, mid 2000s, where they were making like parody movies, like you know, like the scary movies and stuff like that. I watched like maybe two of them, but you know, there's like those other ones where it's just not funny at all. Like I think they were making fun of like there was like one movie, I forgot what it was called. It was like Awesome Movie or some shit like that, where they were parodying a bunch of like, at that time, contemporary movies like 300 and like I don't know what else was popular back in like 2008. No, not Avatar, but like some other shit. They were parodying those types of movies, you know. It was like popular action movies and stuff like that, and it just doesn't work because it's just not funny. It's just more like it's just referencing the original material without expanding on it, you know, maybe making fun of like the logic behind, like, I don't know, it's just not funny. Just the jokes for those types of parody movies just don't really land, you know. So I don't know, because I love spoof movies from like the 90s and the 80s, you know. I love Airplane. I love like the Naked Gun series. Most Mel Brooks movies, I think, are pretty great, and they hold up pretty well for the most part. You know, even if the jokes are a little dated and stupid, I still enjoy them. Spaceballs, that kind of thing, you know. But I just don't. Yeah, I don't think that type of humor and that type of like comedy really works nowadays. I just think it was just sort of like a product of its time, and not necessarily something that's gonna work today. I can't really like I can't really think of like comedy movies where it's like they rely on spoofs and like gags and stuff like that. You know, some movies are like that, but I just can't think of like there are comedy movies out there for sure, but it's more like they have to be more ingrained with this time and stuff like that. You know, I don't know. I think just just things transition from one period to another. Like I think a good example is like, you know, if you look at like a comedy or like what's the word? A sitcom back in like the 50s, right? I think most of the jokes don't really land. And because, you know, it's just a product of its time. Like people back then probably thought it was funny, but nowadays it's just like you can't really relate to any of the humor because it's like it's old humor. It's like, you know, you better clean up your mess, Bobby, or else you'll get a spanking. And then people laugh because, I don't know, people thought that shit was funny back then, you know. I think another thing, we watched in my, what was it, personal computers class, we watched an old clip of an old Monty Python clip, and it was about spam being in every being an ingredient in every thing in the menu, and like it was funny. It's funny for the most part, but I think even the professor knew that like just some things just don't necessarily translate to today's humor. I've like because it's hard to it's even hard to like pinpoint down what today's humor is, right? Because I'll find like the stupidest shit funny, but I also find like some complicated, well-written joke to be funny as well, even if it's like not, it's not laugh out loud funny. Like you'll get like a, just get like just like a minor, just breath of air out of. How do you describe? What do you call that? What do you call it when you like, just like a, when you breathe out of your nose? I don't know what that's called. I just can't think of it at the moment. But it's like, it gets like a chuckle, like it doesn't get like a laugh out loud moment. That kind of thing. It just differs. Some things make me laugh. A lot of things don't make me laugh too. So I think it just comes with the time and your own personality, I guess. I don't really know what else to really say about that. But yeah, I think that's probably going to do it for today. Anyways, it's been Save the Semantics signing off.